All right. The date, November 1st, 1925. The time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The teams, the Cleveland Bulldogs, the New York Giants. The place, the Polo Grounds, New York City. Let's see here. Ticket, if you're interested on going, right? Ticket prices are 50 cents, $1.10, $2.20. And if you really feel like splurging, the top of the line tickets cost $2.75. They're on sale at the New York Baseball Office, 104 West 42nd Street. And there'll be a band concert starting at 1:30. Right? But the game is going to start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Polo Ground, so don't be late. But this would become the Giants' first ever victory. They started off 0-3. First game of the season, they lost 14-0 to the Providence Steamroller. Then they played back-to-back games against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on October 17th and October 18th, back-to-back. And a lot of guys not only played back-to-back games, but they played offense and defense. And they made the top of the line guys. Some of the guys made maybe a few thousand for the season, but that wasn't many. Most guys maybe like $75, $100 a game. So, but it was tough. But this was actually supposed to become the Giants' actual fifth game. But the video I did yesterday was explained that the Giants game against the Buffalo Bisons on October 25th got canceled. I seen, it was a bad storm, very windy and lots of rain. And of course, the fields back then had no drainage, so if it rained, it puddled up, and it was puddles or ponds, however you want to call it. I also saw one article that it said it was like a hurricane. I had looked to see if there were hurricanes in New York City in 1925. I couldn't come up with anything, but I did see an article. I mean, I saw all different articles had different types. One was like a 60-mile-an-hour winds. One was 72 miles an hour. Another one said it was over 80 miles an hour. I mean, to be a hurricane, it's got to be a certain wind, a certain wind speed just to be a hurricane. And one of them said it was a hurricane. So it sounds very dramatic. So it got canceled because of a hurricane. There was horrible weather on the day they were supposed to play the Buffalo Bisons on October 25th. Even down south, there was tornadoes in Alabama. People were dying, lots of deaths. Oddly enough, 4 days later, really weird. So on October 25th, it was kind of like hurricane type conditions. And then 4 days later, on October 29th, New York City got some snow, about less than an inch, but they got some snow in October. So very odd. But this is November 1st. So, I mean, so the Giants played, they lost their first three games. They lost 14-0. They lost to the Providence Steamroller. Then they lost 5-3 to the Yellow Jackets. Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. Then they played them again. They lost 14-0 to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. So this will become the Giants' fourth game because the one game got postponed. So this is November 1st. The Giants were supposed to play the Buffalo Bisons, which got postponed, which on October 25th. So that got postponed to November 3rd. So this is Sunday, November 1st. 2 days later, on November 3rd, the Giants would play another football game against the Buffalo Bisons. So it was tough back then. It was tough. I mean, it was, I mean, the way it is now, like with the Giants just beat the Cardinals on Sunday. Here it is 4 days later, they're playing the 49ers. And a lot of the players complain about that. Well, I mean, back in the day when the guys made like hardly any money at all, now we got guys making millions, $1 million or so a game, back then guys were making $50 to $100 a game, and they were playing back-to-back games. So, but this would be, let's see here. All right, Cleveland. They were the defending champions, by the way. So this would be Cleveland's 5th game. Actually, this would have been the Giants' 5th game had they not had the one game that got canceled. So this was Cleveland's 5th game. They coming into this game were 2-2. They were the champions the year before. I'm gonna go over the story of their team. And actually, interestingly enough, they actually had some ties. Actually, when they wound up at the end of the road for their team, which I'm going to read the story. They actually had ties, big time ties to the New York Giants. So, but the Cleveland Bulldogs would finish 5-8-1 this particular season. So they were not a particularly good team. They had a lot of guys. Let's see here, play on their roster. I mean, the Giants had 29 for the whole season, but the Cleveland Bulldogs had 40. I mean, they had a lot of guys play like 1 game, 2 games. I mean, let's see here. Count this is the amount of guys that played 1 game for them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They had 12 guys play 1 game for them. Now, this is the amount of guys that, I'll just stop here. This is the amount of guys that played 2 games for them. So they had 12 guys to play 1 game. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they had 6 guys. So basically they had 18 guys. Almost half their roster played either 1 game or 2 games for them. I'm not exactly sure if it was exactly what all the turnover was for that or from. I don't know. I mean, did that many guys get injured? Who knows? I do know that, so you get a bad enough injury, your season's over with, if it's bad enough. Or if it was that bad, your career might be over with, because obviously things aren't the way they are today. But they were not a very good team. They were 5-8-1. They finished 12th place out of 20 teams. Let's see, points for. They averaged 5.4 points per game, and they gave up 9.6 points per game. Unlike the Giants, who Giants finished up 8-4 for their first season ever. Not too bad, not too shabby. Points for the Giants, 10.2 points per game, which back then was pretty good. Points against, 5.6 points per game. So basically, the Giants were 5th in the league in both. They were in the top 5 as far as points scored and points against. Top 5 in their first year in existence. That's pretty darn good. But this would be the Giants' 4th game. The Giants came in going 0-3. But I mean, the Giants would really rebound. They would wind up winning 8 of their final 9 games, and they would finish. They start off 0-3, but they would finish 8-4. So I mean, they did a very, very good job of finishing the season. But let's see here. I get Buffalo, Cleveland here. All right, so the Cleveland Bulldogs. Let's see here. The Cleveland Bulldogs were a team that played in Cleveland, Ohio, in the National Football League. They were originally called the Indians in 1923, not to be confused with the Cleveland Indians baseball team. But not to be confused with the Cleveland Indians NFL franchise in 1922. However, after team owner Samuel Deutsch purchased the Canton Bulldogs in 1924, he merged the Canton team with his Indians and renamed the franchise the Cleveland Bulldogs. The Canton Bulldogs remained a part of the team until 1925, when they were sold back to Canton. Excuse me. Cleveland Bulldogs played in the NFL until 1928, when they were relocated to Detroit and became the Detroit Wolverines. but there's a little more of a story behind it than that. The team was later incorporated into the New York Giants in 1929, which I'll go over a little bit more in a little bit. The Cleveland Bulldogs won the 1924 NFL championship. Now, in 1924, they were 7-1-1. It was a pretty close race, because you figure back then, from 1920 to 1932, there's no championship game. Whoever had the best overall winning percentage won the championship. Now, the Cleveland Bulldogs were 7-1-1. Ties didn't count back then. So basically, they were just 7-1. So they were 7-1-1. Their winning percentage was .875. The Chicago Bears were 6-1-4. Their winning percentage was .857. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were 11-2-1. Their winning percentage was .846. And the Duluth Kellys were 5-1. And their winning percentage was .833. So you had 4 teams from .833 to .875. So it was a close race, very, very close race. Now, had the Duluth Kellys maybe played 2 more games, and if they had won both of them, they would have finished 7-1, and they would have been tied with the Cleveland Bulldogs. But they only played 6 games. I mean, some teams, so like the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets in 1924 played 14 games. The Kenosha Maroons played 5. Minneapolis Marines played 6. Rochester Jeffersons played 7. Hammond Pros played 5. There was no set schedule. Duluth Kellys played 6 games. There was not like the way it is today. Every team plays 17 games. Every team has a bye week. Every team this, every team that. It wasn't like that back then. Some teams, as I said, this year, Frankfurt Yellow Jacks played 14, while other teams played 5. All right. So it's pretty much like almost kind of like every man for himself. All right, the origins of the Cleveland Bulldogs. Sam Deutsch, a Cleveland jeweler and boxing promoter who also owned a minor league baseball team, bought an NFL franchise in 1923 and named the team the Indians. They played only 7 games in that first season, but they had a shot at the championship with a record of 3-0-3. Record going into their final game against the Canton Bulldogs, who were also undefeated. The Indians were defeated. They lost 46-0 and posted a 3-1-3 league record, finishing 5th in the league, which comprised 20 teams at the time. Now the Canton Bulldogs, they won the 1922 and 1923 championship. So the Bulldogs won 3 years in a row. Canton in 22 and 23, and the Cleveland Bulldogs won the championship in 1924. So they purchased the Canton Bulldogs in 1924. However, in August 1924, Deutsch bought the defending NFL champion Canton Bulldogs for $2,500. And now you have to spend like $5 billion to buy a team, right? The Bulldogs were experiencing heavy financial troubles at the time and were sold to Deutsch without much of a struggle. Deutsch combined the Cleveland Indians, his team, with the Canton Bulldogs, creating a new team. So basically, he took the Cleveland part and he took the Bulldog part, combined them together, and you got the Cleveland Bulldogs. The Cleveland Bulldogs, only 7 of the Canton players actually joined the new Bulldogs. Among them was player coach Guy Chamberlain. The team played all of its home games at Dunn Field, although Deutsch returned the team to Canton for the Thanksgiving game that season. They played, where they played, where are we at here? On November 27th, the Milwaukee Badgers played at the Cleveland Bulldogs, but they actually played in Canton. It was Lakeside Park. Lakeside Park was actually in Canton, Ohio. So they returned for Thanksgiving. So they did play one game in 1924, which was actually supposed to be a home game, but they wound up going to Canton and they wound up playing the Thanksgiving Day game in Canton. And the Cleveland Bulldogs wound up winning 53-10. So they did a number on them. All right, let's see here. The 1924 champions and controversies. There was always some controversy going on. I always seemed like there was some. 1925, there was a controversy. 1921, there was a controversy. There was always like a controversy going on. The Cleveland Bulldogs won the NFL championship that year with a record of 7-1-1. And the Bears always seemed, in 1921, it was the Staley swindle, because they were called the Chicago Staleys back then. And they kind of screwed, maybe, possibly, however you want to read into it, right? They kind of screwed the Buffalo team, the Buffalo All-Americans. They were turned into the Buffalo Bisons, but the Buffalo All-Americans in 1921, they kind of screwed them over. I'll go over more of that in detail tomorrow when I do my video on the Buffalo Bison and the Giant game on November 3rd. That's played on November 3rd, 1925. I'll go a little more into that in detail then. But the especially George Halas and the Chicago Staleys / Chicago Bears were always trying to swindle somebody, always trying to get an extra game at the end of the season in there and try to, maybe win it and try to come up with the title. This year, it didn't work out in their favor, and I'm happy for it. I'm really, really happy. Glad they got screwed over. After winning their first 6 games, the Bulldogs lost to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets and entered a virtual tie with the Chicago Bears for first place in the standings. The Bears played more games, but also had more ties, and their one loss had come in the season opener against the Bulldogs. The Bears attempted to have an after-season exhibition game counted toward the standings. They're always like, well, you know what? Yeah, well, let's play another game. Yeah, because the Bears don't. If the Bears played another game, if they won, they'd been champions. If they lost, well, because they were, I believe they were 6-1-4. If I can see this here, they were 6-1-4. And the Cleveland Bulldogs were 7-1-1. So the Bears tried to get another game. So if the Bears won, they would have been 7-1-4, and the Bulldogs would have been 7-2-1. The Bears would have had a better winning percentage, so therefore the Bears would have won. But if the Bears lost, we're in second place. If we lose, okay, so we don't get the So they tried to do this. They did the same thing in 1921 with the Buffalo All-Americans. This time they tried to do the same thing in 1924 with the Cleveland Bulldogs. So, all right. The Bears attempted to have an after-season exhibition game counted toward the standings. However, in 1924, this was against the NFL rules. In July 1924, NFL owners had agreed on a proposal that the 1924 NFL season would begin on September 27 and end on November 30th. Ironically, as it turned out, the proposal was made by Dutch Sternman, the co-owner of the Bears, on the official end date. So, Cleveland had a 7-1-1 record to the Bears 6-1-4. Ties didn't count at all in those days, so the Bulldogs were in first place with a winning percentage of .875, and the Bears had a winning percentage of .857. However, on December 7th, 1924, the Bulldogs went to Chicago for a challenge match. The Bears won the game 23-0 and claimed, because this is what they tried to do, well, let's get an extra game in there, because if the Bears won, they could claim that they were the champions. But if they lost, that didn't matter because they were in second place going into the game. So if they lost, they would still be in second, third place or whatever. But if they won, they can claim, hey, we're champions. They always try to swindle. The Chicago Bears. Let's see. And they tried to claim that they deserved the NFL championship. They cited as a precedent the 1921 championship decision, which is the same thing that happened here. 1921, the Buffalo All-Americans were in first place, and they beat the Bears, and the Bears demanded a rematch. And the All-Americans said, yeah, okay, this will just be an exhibition game. And we'll play you, but it doesn't count in the standings. Well, it wound up coming back to bite them in the ass because they wound up counting it in the standings, and therefore the Bears had won the second game, and they had a better winning percentage, and they wound up getting the title. So they're trying to do the same thing this year too. Let's see here. That declared that there was no such thing as an exhibition game. So all games counted. There was no such thing as an exhibition game, the Bears said. However, the issue wasn't settled until the owners' meeting in January, when the owners voted for Cleveland to take the title. The owners also decided that at the meeting that the 1925 season would run through December 20th. So, they decided when the season started and when it ended. So the 1925 season would end December 20th. So if you played a game on December 21st, it was an exhibition game, whatever you want to call it, but it did not count in the standings. So they gave the parameters. The season starts here and it ends here. Any games played after this, they don't count in the standings. So it's the same thing the Bears tried to do in 1921. They screwed the Buffalo All-Americans, according to Wikipedia, right? And they did, and they wind up winning the championship. And they tried to do the same thing here in 1924, but it didn't work this time. The Cleveland Bulldogs were declared the champions. So that was bam. All right, so that was in 1924. Then they had their decline. 1925, several Canton businessmen purchased the rights to the old Canton Bulldogs team from Deutsch for $3,000. The Bulldogs, now known as the Canton Bulldogs, played in Canton during the 1925 and 26 seasons. However, Deutsch continued to call his Cleveland franchise the Bulldogs. He also sold his Cleveland Indians half of the club to Herb Brandt in August 1925. That season, the Cleveland Bulldogs fell to a dismal 5-8-1 record. The team performed poorly on the field and at the bank. By mid-November, the organization was nearly bankrupt. In 1926, Brandt received authority from the league to suspend operations for a year. The Bulldogs then returned in 1927, bolstered by players from the folded Kansas City Cowboy franchise. Deutsch returned as the principal owner of his new Cleveland Bulldogs club. He, along with investors Max Rosenblum, Brandt, Harold Gold, and Clinton Winfrey, built the new Bulldogs around the native Clevelander Benny Friedman, a star quarterback at the University of Michigan. He could throw the football. The team finished fourth in the National Football League this season with a record of 8-4-1. At the end of the season, Elliot Fisher purchased the Bulldogs and moved the team to Detroit, renaming the team the Detroit Wolverines. The 1928 Wolverines consisted of 12 former Bulldogs players before the 1929 season. Tim Mara, owner of the New York Giants, purchased the entire Wolverines squad, including Benny Friedman, and absorbed the team into the New York Giants franchise. 8 former Bulldog players ended up playing for the Giants that season, and Benny Friedman wound up playing 3 seasons for the Giants, and he could throw the football. The Giants led in 1929 and 1930, the Giants led the league. They scored over 300 points. I mean, he was a very good quarterback back then at throwing the football. Very, very good. So the Giants actually wound up in a way buying the Cleveland Bulldogs, a few years later after this game here. And because they came the Detroit Wolverines, they had financial troubles. And so Tim Mara bought the team, but basically the reason why he bought the team was he wanted Benny Friedman. And so he bought the team, and not everybody on the team became a Giant, but as it says here, 8 of the players wound up becoming Giants that season. As I said, Benny Friedman wound up being huge, a huge purchase. So the Giants actually had ties and connections to the Cleveland Bulldogs. Yes, so here it says season by season. They were called the Cleveland Indians in 1923. Their record was 3-1-3. 1924 and 25, they were the Bulldogs. 1926, they suspended operations. In 1927, they were the Cleveland Bulldogs. They were 8-4-1. And in 1928, they become the Detroit Wolverines. And in 1929, Tim Mara wound up buying the Detroit Wolverines. So very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So that was that's the story for the Cleveland Bulldogs. And I got this. This is a little story I got here. This is from, if you can see it here. I keep getting stuff from out of this book here. It's pretty good. I mean, it goes back in time. It starts from the beginning of the Giants, 1925. I think the last season is 1962 or 63. I haven't gotten all the way through the book yet. So it only goes to like the early 60s. So it doesn't go, there's no helmet catch, Tyree, there's no Lawrence Taylor, none of that. So Super Bowl wasn't even around back then. But one thing that did happen was after the final game, the Giants played the final game that the last game that they just played. It was a home game. The home loss to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets on October 18th. The Polo Grounds, they lost 14-0. Some of the guys weren't around after that game. One of them was Jim Thorpe because he got injured, and he played 3 games for the Giants. His Giant career was over. But it's interesting. Apparently, a couple of the older players were no longer on the team. Apparently, some of them were maybe some problem childs. It says here, with Jim Thorpe and Nash and a few other problem veterans no longer with the team. Now, this was after the Frankfurt Yellow Jacket game. This is after the Giants' 3rd game. So some of the problem other veteran players were no longer with the team. Coach Bob Folwell began to make progress with his younger players, settling on a backfield of, I think it's Hendrian at quarterback, Haynes, meaning Hinkie Haynes, who actually scored the first 2 touchdowns in Giants history in this Bulldog game that we're going to be talking about in just a minute, and Benker at halfback, and McBride at fullback. Hendrian did a masterful job calling plays and signals from the standard single wing and punt formations, and the Giants finally began to play team football against the favorite Cleveland Bulldogs, NFL champions in 1924, which we just went over. The Giants exploded to a 19-0 victory, but attendance dwindled to 18,000 with less than 10,000 paid. Now, what would happen was just to get people out into to the stands, to the game and all of that, Mr. Mara, John would give away free tickets. They would give away like thousands of free tickets just to get people to come watch football. So even if maybe some people got in there for free, and maybe they look, this is pretty cool. I might want to come and see another game. So they were giving away stuff, so kind of hoping down along the line it would actually pay off. But you see the attendance of 18,000, but I mean, maybe half of those people, maybe 10,000 or so, might maybe paid to get in, Let's see, it says here, we're less than 10,000 paid. So out of the 18,000 people that showed up, probably about half of them were paying customers. Now you figure if they're paying 50 cents to $1 for a ticket, you figure that maybe, I don't know, what, $6,000-$7,000 were won at the gate. So, I mean, I don't know if the 2 teams, I think, maybe split it. So if there was $7,000 from the gate, Giants got $3,500, the other team got $3,500. But if you got 20 guys on your roster and you're paying each guy, $50 to $100 a game, there's $1,500 or so right there of just the roster. Then the washing the uniforms, and of course the Giants, they have to rent out the Polo Grounds. I don't know what that costs to rent out the Polo Grounds for. So I mean, if they only made $3,000-$4,000, chances are he probably didn't make anything. He might have lost money, right? So that's why getting the attendance was so important back then. Thorpe might have been finished as a player, but his name still was missed at the gate. Because he helped draw some people in. The great athlete, maybe the greatest athlete of all time. Some people say Jim Thorpe. He was 38 years old, but just his name being on the roster, would bring some extra people in. But he was not he got injured against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, and he never played ever again for the Giants. He only played 3 games. Yet for many Giant fans in New York already had a new hero, slim, flashy Henry Luther Haynes, or Hinkie Haynes, a dangerous runner and agile receiver who scored twice against Cleveland. The first 2 touchdowns in Giant history were Hinkie Haynes. One was a rushing touchdown, one was a receiving touchdown. McBride and Hendrian, both triple threats, were more versatile, but 170-pound Hinkie Haynes was more spectacular. By the 5th week of the season, Giants newspaper ads read, "Come see Hinkie Haynes and his New York Football Giants." So then it said, at times during the 1925 season, the Giants organization seemed more a roadshow comedy than a professional football team. Moments after the Cleveland game had ended, a minister convinced a policeman to arrest Dr. March and Captain Hendrian for playing football on the Sabbath, meaning playing football on Sunday. A punishable offense in Pennsylvania, but not in New York, because in Pennsylvania they had blue laws where you couldn't play sports on Sunday. That was, against the law. But in New York you could. The judge tossed the case out of court immediately, but the minister, obviously a baseball fan, had March and another Giant brought to court on the same charge later in the season. Doesn't make any sense. But Coach Bob Folwell, a profane talker and a colorful character, drove to the Polo Grounds from his New Jersey apple orchard every afternoon and returned home in confusion every evening. At the start of the season, the Giant management had suggested that perhaps some of the players' wives would like to watch their husbands practice. A few of the wives showed up for the first couple of afternoons, but by the end of the week, only Century Milstead's wife, Mildred Milstead, there you go, was left, and she never stopped coming. This wouldn't have created any problems except for one thing. The only passageway into and out of the Polo Grounds during practice was straight through the Giants clubhouse. So to watch the Giants practice, Mildred Milstead would shut her eyes twice every day and a prearranged signal run through the dressing room. So basically she'd have to run through the dressing like this. So the guys were naked or whatever. So she wouldn't have to wind up seeing them or anything like that. So it was pretty funny. But all right, so I got a couple of articles here that actually talks about the game. And I said the game started at 2:00 in the afternoon. Let me find these articles. Sometimes you got 3,000 tabs open up here. It's all right. So here we go. So we got this one here. It says Giants beat Cleveland at football, and it says Mrs. Mallory loses to Miss Ryan in final. Maybe that's a different story. Miss Ryan winner. Oh, okay, that's a different story. It says Mrs. Mallory loses to Miss Ryan in final. That's a beauty contest, so that's got nothing to do with this. But it says Giants beat Cleveland at football. So it's revamped Giants crush Cleveland. So meaning I just read that little story there, like some of the older players were no longer with the Giants. So Coach Bob Folwell said on he had his backfield. He said on some younger players, and and things really started turning around. And the Giants won 8 of their final 9 games after starting 0-3. Haynes leads attack for New York pros with 2 touchdowns. Score is 19-0. It says 18,000 see hard contest, but that's 18,000. But I just read in the book, maybe half of those people paid. Maybe 9,000 of those people paid. Said victors with Jappy, Parnell, and Benkert in the lineup use strong aerial attack to advantage. All right, here. Playing an entirely different brand of football from what they showed against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets 2 weeks ago. The New York Football Giants trounced the Cleveland Bulldogs, champions of the National Professional Football League, 1924. They beat them yesterday by the score of 19-0. Another great gathering of 18,000 spectators thronged to the Polo Grounds yesterday to see the second game of professional league football in this city. Now, as I said, 18,000, which is great. I mean, it's not really great, actually. I mean, not in the stadium. It can hold maybe about 70,000. But as I said, half of those tickets were just given away. It was thoroughly partisan gathering filled with a pride in its team of all-American stars and ready to cheer. and ready to cheer its head off at every opportunity. A 30-piece band from the Catholic Protectorate and a fife and drum and bugle corps from the 69th Regiment added to the liveliness of the proceedings, and 4 cheerleaders directed the vocal efforts of the cheering section, of which the Thursday Nighters performed the nucleus. So I guess the Giants maybe they had cheerleaders at one time. There was plenty to cheer about. Coach Bob Folwell put a team on the field that was filled with fight and that played so entirely different a brand of football from what it showed in its first local game that it was hard to recognize it as the same outfit. So maybe if they had the same players on the field doing playing the same way that they did against the Cleveland Bulldogs, they lost their previous game to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets at home 14-0. Maybe if they played this way again with the Cleveland Bulldogs, they might have beaten Frankfurt, or maybe at least the game might have been a little closer. Let's see. The tackling was deadly. The attack concentrated and smooth, working, and every man on the field was out there apparently to give his last ounce of energy. I love the way they drew these stories up. Cleveland fought with all its heart too, and the football shown was fully up to the standards of intercollegiate play. It was a splendid exhibition in every way, and although New York was clearly the superior 11, the interest was sustained to the last minute. The New York lineup showed 3 changes. In place of Nash, who was released with Jim Thorpe, Jappy of Syracuse was at end. Parnell of Colgate at tackle in place of McGinley of Penn, and Reinkert of Rutgers started in the backfield, replacing Thorpe. All 3 new men played well. New York standing ball carrier. He scored 2 touchdowns in the first half and then was taken out in order that he might be conserved for the game with Walter Koppish's Buffalo Bisons at the Polo Grounds tomorrow, meaning November 3rd. Haynes tore loose for gain after gain, and his handling of passes was sensational. Twice, he caught long heaves from McBride on his fingertips, sidestepping tacklers to make gains of 30 and 28 yards, respectively, in the second quarter. On the second occasion, he threw himself across the goal line for his second touchdown. Hendrian of Pittsburgh, Bankert, and McBride all teamed well with Haynes, the 4 of them making a combination behind the powerful New York line that was hard to stop. New York's first touchdown came in the opening quarter, taking the ball from their own 26-yard line. The Giants carried it down the field on 5 successive first downs. Nice drive. Haynes completed a pass of 20 yards in this march and then received a lateral pass, crossing the goal line for the first score. The try for point was missed, though. So Haynes received a lateral, ran it in for a touchdown for the Giants' first ever score in the Giants' history. Hinky Haynes. There you go, HH. The second touchdown was made through a series of passes. Taking the ball on their own 25-yard line, the Giants went for a touchdown. McBride netted 30 yards, then heaved a bullet-like pass to Jaffe for 7 yards more. A diagonal pass from Hendrian to Haynes netted 28 yards and the second touchdown. Cleveland fought the Giants on even terms in the third period and several times threatened to score, only to fail when within striking distance of the goal line. New York's last touchdown was made late in the fourth quarter. It says here the lineup here. Jappy was the left end. Milstead was the left tackle. Williams was the left guard. Alexander was the center. Carney was the right guard. Parnell was the right tackle. Bomar was the right end. Hendrian was the quarterback. Hinky Haynes was the left halfback. Bankert was the right halfback, and McBride was the fullback. The Cleveland team, they had Work was the left end. Meredith was the left tackle. Vince was the left guard. Crineheader was the center. Wallace was the right guard. Sprinkle was the right tackle. Williams was the right end. Wolf was the quarterback. Michaels was the left halfback. Noble was the right halfback. And Elliott was the fullback. Let's see here. Let's see. Touchdown. Hanky Haynes scored 2 touchdowns. And Hendrian scored the other one. Let me see. I think it'd be a little bit more. I got it here. 1925 New York Giants. Here we go. All right. The Cleveland Bulldogs box score here. All right. They got. Oh, okay. All right. Hinky Haynes was a 5-yard rush in the first quarter. In the second quarter, Hinky Haynes was a 20. They got a 25-yard pass here. It said in the article, it said it was a 28-yard reception. So it was either 25 or 28-yard reception. Take your pick. Joe Williams scored the third touchdown for the Giants. It was a 2-yard rush. And the Giants only made one. Dutch Hendrian was their extra point kicker. He missed 2 out of 3 extra points. So the Giants, that's why it was 19-0 instead of 21-0. Let's see here. What do we got? Substitutions. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Giants had 6 substitutions, and then 1, 2, 3. The Cleveland had 3. So for the whole game, there was only 9 substitutions for the whole game. So basically, a lot of those guys just played 60 minutes of football. That's a long day's work. And especially if you figure that 2 days later, they gotta play another game. At least the Giants did anyway. All right, so here's the other one here. It says Grid Giants beat Cleveland 19-0. Haynes gallops over goal line for 2 scores. So what happened was, with Jim Thorpe being there, he was the big headline. He was the big name, but he got hurt after 3 games, never played ever again. And then so Hinky Haynes, especially this season, he became the name. He was a very good athlete, not very big, 170 pounds, but a very, very good athlete. So he wound up becoming the face, if you want to call it, of the Giants. At least for the 1925 season, anyway. It says Haynes gallops over goal line for 2 scores. After taking it on the chin twice in a row, those husky Gridiron Giants came back with a rush at the Polo Grounds yesterday and flattened the Cleveland Bulldogs, the 1924 National Professional League champions, by a score 19-0 in a battle that was hard fought every step of the way. About 20,000 fans witnessed the contest. Now, most part, it said about 18,000. So 3 touchdowns turned the trick. Hinky Haynes accounted for 2 of those, and Joe Ink Williams made the other just a few minutes before the final whistle blow. So right at the end of the fourth quarter, maybe a couple minutes left to go, Joe Ink Williams put the dagger in there, put him up by 3 scores. So, and then it was over with by then. There ain't no coming. You're back then. I mean, nowadays you can score about 300 times within like about a minute. Back then, you were up by 3 scores. You're up by 19 points with like 2-3 minutes. It's over. You can forget about it. It says Haynes again. Haynes' first touchdown came in the opening period when he grabbed McBride pass and dashed around left end from the 5-yard mark. Hendrian's kick for the extra point was neatly blocked by Work. So Work of Cleveland. So he blocked it. So that's why. So that's why he wound up missing it. But it said he took a pass, but it was more like a backwards lateral. That's why he ran it in from 5 yards out. Late in the second period, Mr. Haynes again stepped to the fore when he collected Jappy's forward pass on the 25-yard line right after the Giants had crashed through for 3 successive first downs and dashed over the goal just as Work smeared him. Work was a busy guy, smearing Haynes, blocking extra points. So Work gave it his all for the Cleveland Bulldogs. Hendrian did better this trip and made the score 13-0 with his accurate boot through the upright. Boot through the upright. That's what they call making the extra point back then. Some passing shortly after the last period got underway with the Bulldogs in possession of the leather. Not possession of the football. They were possession of the leather. On the Giants' 25-yard line, Noble crashed through guard for a first down. After making 3 futile stabs at the line, Elliott tossed a pass to Noble behind the Giant goal, but Benkert batted it down. Right after this, McBride tossed a 50-yard pass, which Wolf intercepted and carried back to the Giants' 25-yard line. That was the visitors' last threat. Just before the game ended, somebody in the Cleveland line took a poke at Ink Williams' chin, and the referee imposed a 25-yard penalty. Wow. Holy cow, 25-yard. I didn't know that. Let me read that again. Just before the game ended, somebody in the Cleveland line took a poke, I guess tried to throw a punch, at Ink Williams' chin, and the referee imposed a 25-yard penalty. Wow. Ballmore then took a pass from McBride and carried the ball to the Cleveland's 10-yard mark. Benkert tore around left end for 8 yards and a first down, and then Williams crashed through for the final touchdown. So they had Ballmore took a pass and carried it to the 10, and then Benkert tore around left end for 8 yards, so get the ball down to the 2-yard line. So then Williams crashed through for the final touchdown from 2 yards out, basically with a couple minutes left to go in the game. Coach Bob Folwell, having brought him back from the line to the backfield for that express purpose. Interesting. Let's see. Got the same thing, got the same lineup. Work was the left end, so Work, the guy from Cleveland, who's the one that who blocked the extra point and all and everything. So the Giants scored 6 points in the first period, 7 points in the second period. There was no scoring in the third, and then Williams' touchdown in the fourth quarter made it 19-0, and they missed the extra point once again. So that was so with the Giants, the Giants had some new blood in there. So instead of Jim Thorpe, so some of the older players, I guess, were no longer with the Giants. And Nash was one of them. I think he was 33 years old. Let's see if I can. There we go. See if I can get the Giants roster. I know he obviously Jim Thorpe was 38. He was no longer. And for some reason, they let Nash go. They let Bob Nash go, who was 33 years old. So he only played 3 games for the Giants as well, too. Let me see. And Thorpe played 3 games. Yeah. So they put some new blood in there. Coach Bob Folwell, who only coached the 1 season for the Giants, put some new blood back there, changed stuff up, and things really started clicking. Now, had they been this way all along, maybe they wouldn't have lost their first 3 games of the season. But let me see here, 19. Here we go. Because the Giants were 8-4. The Chicago Cardinals, who actually won, were 11-2. So they had a winning percentage of 846. Now, if the Giants won a couple more games, they didn't lose. If they had these new guys, these younger guys in the backfield all along, maybe they don't lose all 3 of those games. Maybe, but the Giants didn't lose. They wound up in 5th place with a record of 8-4 winning percentage. Actually, they were tied for 4th with the Akron Pros. The Akron Pros were 4-2. The Giants were 8-4. They both had winning percentages of 667. So the Giants wound up tied for 4th. The Chicago Cardinals were 11-2. They won the championship. The Pottsville Maroons were in 2nd place. They were a record of 10-2, and they had a winning percentage of 833. The Detroit Panthers were 8-2. They had a winning percentage of 800. So the Giants were actually technically with a winning percentage of 667, wind up tied for fourth place with the Akron Pros. So, I mean, it took them a few games, but they actually got a little bit of their act together. They started scoring some points, and they had 9. They were 0-3. They had 9 games to go, and they would wind up winning 8 of their final 9 games. And actually, they would win like 7 games in a row. Then they would play the Bears 2 games in a row. They would lose their 8th game, and in the final 9, they would lose their 8th game. Then they would win the 9th games. But this game right here, they were 0-3. They would win their next 7 games. So they go from 0-3 to 7-3. So very, very impressive. So that pretty much wraps up about this game here, right? And then we'll be back again tomorrow night talking about the November 3rd game against the Buffalo Bisons, which was postponed from October 25th due to the storm or hurricane, if you will. So that's what happened on this date, November 1st, 1925, in New York football Giants history. I'll see you next time.